Hello and welcome to the Human First podcast with me, Adrian Murphy. I'm absolutely delighted to be joined by Mike Grieve from Glasgow's very own sub club today. I think it'd be fair to say, Mike, you've had a fair old influence on myself and many others out there that will be listening to this, whether directly or indirectly, through your career. So it's probably worthwhile you giving us a wee bit of an introduction into who you are and what you do.
Yeah, sure. Well, obviously I've been so closely associated with the sub club over the last 30 years or more that that kind of dominates any kind of conversation that I might have. I started promoting club nights and DJing back in the mid-80s up in Aberdeen. I opened my own nightclub in Aberdeen by the name of Fever in 1989. By the mid-90s I was back down in Glasgow, and I was asked to take over running the sub club on behalf of the then owners. So that's where the journey with the sub club really began for me, was in 1994 when I became the general manager. And
it's quite something for as testament to your hard work and vision, and I know you've had other people around you over the years as well to have, because it's obviously a passion of mine, paying close attention to have a nightclub that's been running for now well over 30.
Well, it's close to 40 years now,
40
really.
years total.
Yeah.
And I also, having just celebrated probably the world's longest running weekly residency in subculture for 30 years, that it's unheard of, isn't it? And as we were talking earlier off camera, it was the challenges along the way are innumerable. And you've had COVID as well more recently. So maybe talk. If you could talk us through some of those challenges and how you kind of the thought process worked along the way, how you planned for what might be coming, or maybe you didn't.
But I think actually the clue is in that question, really, that a lot of these things have kind of happened of their own accord almost, and there have always been challenges, and I guess the biggest challenge we faced was in 1999 when the club was closed down because of a fire in the neighbouring building. And it was actually a demolition company. When they were pulling down what was left of that building, they managed to wreck the gable end of our building, and although we didn't realise at the time we were going to be out for any length of time, we ended up out of the building for 3 years. So during that time, myself and my colleague Paul Crawford took over the lease from the family that had owned it up to that point, rebuilt the club, reopened it in 2002, and here still am, with, as you say, many other challenges under my belt, I guess it'd be fair to say.
There's a fair bit of experience there. I mean, you were very to kind of, and I actually I'm old enough now to remember those days when the something so iconic as the sub club, you managed to keep it going even when it wasn't in the actual club itself, which in of itself is a miracle.
we would never have done it if we knew we were going to be out for 3 years. I mean, we thought we were going to be out for weeks, maybe 2 or 3 months, and so we decided to take the nights into other venues, just to keep the thing alive for that period of time. And it was after we discovered that as I said, the demolition had wrecked the building, we started to realise, well, we're going to be out of here for some time. But even then, it was maybe 6 months, maybe a year, whatever. What we didn't realise was that what they actually had to do was they had to build a structure to support the whole building, and then take down the bit, or the gable end of the building, and then rebuild it from there. And that whole process, as I say, took 3 years. It was almost exactly 3 years that we were out. So that undoubtedly goes down as the biggest challenge. Of course, COVID more recently presented a huge challenge for everyone in our industry, and in some respects, especially for us, just given the nature of some of the things that happened. So yeah, it's been quite a journey.
Yeah. How do you can, I guess you've got the benefit of looking back now. There's always that challenge of, especially doing something like you do, is very time consuming, and the hours are perhaps not the most sociable. How did you, and you had a family at the time, how did you manage that kind of the business bit and the very kind of peculiar nature of I guess running a nightclub with having a family at the same time?
Yeah, almost accidentally again, really. In actual fact, when I went there in 1994, I really thought I was going to be there for maybe a year or something. My daughter had just been born, my first child, and I thought, I needed a job. I thought I'd give it a crack for a year or maybe a couple of years before finding some more grown-up type of gainful employment. And but it just that I guess it's one of these things that's in your blood. It's just it's something, and obviously something that I've a lot of that I've taken a lot of pleasure from, but also something that I developed a skill set, and really that comes from the adversity, I think, generally. I think as in a lot of areas of life, you learn a lot more by facing difficult challenges than you do by having an easy ride. So that would really be a period of life when it was very difficult for my wife to have a young baby, and and me working 5 nights a week and 5 days a week. That was a challenging period in the 90s, and then it was I was probably thinking towards the end of the 90s that I'd be maybe looking for an exit when the fire happened. And that kind of catapulted me into ultimately into an ownership situation again, which hadn't really been my intention up to that point. So I think a lot of things in life tend to happen to you rather than, obviously you want to plan for every eventuality that you can, and everyone would say that's the sensible way to go about life. But I've found in my life an awful lot of things that just kind of happen,
It's never quite a straight line, is it?
Never straightforward.
You can lay out all the best laid plans, and then something like that act of God happens, and that's you. How have you kept yourself? I mean, doing something like this must be a passion. You wouldn't do it if you didn't love it.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, the starting point for me was, as I say, in the mid-80s, DJing and promoting nights myself. And, it became almost an obsession more so than just a passion. Back in those days, myself and my partner that I did it with at the time, we had 4 different nights running across Thursday, Friday, Saturday and Sunday in Aberdeen in the mid-80s. We had 3 different venues. So Friday and Saturday were in one venue, the Thursday was in another venue, and the Sunday was in another venue. And then in 1989 we opened our own nightclub in one of the venues that we'd previously done nights in, and that was actually in 1989. It was really the first kind of dedicated dance music space in Scotland where the DJs owned the venue. But that in itself presented a lot of challenges, and we were in the eye of a storm up there as well in Aberdeen, and it was it lasted for 3 years before we had to close down. I think it'd be fair to say we had quite a good party for 3 years, but as I say, there were other challenges there, and from that point when Fever closed down in Aberdeen, I moved back down to Glasgow, and as I say, then I was asked to go and run the sub club.
And here we are still.
Here
today.
we are.
Well, what the culture you've developed and the longevity, what do you put? I mean, it's not easy to do. Everyone would do it otherwise, right? Because there's lots of people who are passionate about music and all these things. What is it about you and a sub club that is sustained and thrived for such a long time?
Well, I mean, obviously, I'm regularly asked how's the sub club managed to last as long, and there are very few establishments in the world that have stayed true to their beliefs and stayed pure to that kind of dance music ethos that have lasted anything like that length of time without ever kind of becoming much more commercial or selling out, as people would say. Yeah. But I think there's a number of things come into that. The space itself actually that we occupy is lends itself incredibly well to what we do, and it was actually going back before it was a sub club. It's had all sorts of different things going on in it. But in the 50s and 60s, it was a speakeasy where jazz musicians, if they were playing in Glasgow in some of the big theatre halls or whatever, they would go down there afterwards and they would have after hours kind of things. After hours in those days, I believe, was maybe between 10 o'clock and midnight. That was kind of considered late.
So we bit different now.
And then it actually had a period in its life. The building had a period in its life or the basement, where it was the original Jamaica Inn, which Rio Stack has developed a chain, one of the first steakhouse chains in the UK, off the back of that premises, and we still actually have the odd flyer for it where it's like dinner dance with Dougie Donnelly, and it's I can't remember. I think your dinner and your dance came in for about £1.45 or something like that. I remember seeing this flyer and it said £1.45 including VAT, which VAT was still obviously a bit controversial in those days. The building itself has a big part to play in it. The space, it's just got, it kind of feels like a music venue, so that's really important. Beyond that, it's the people. It's the people that work there, that play there, and of course the people that come there as punters. That's really what makes it so special. I think is the involvement of people who really care passionately about what they're doing. I think that's the trick, really.
And is that passion, is that the thing that keeps you going?
Yeah, I mean, I think it is. I think it's when you have input from people that care so deeply about it, makes it hard to walk away from. I mean, I think it's there's a lot of experience in there. People that really know what they're about. They're not just kind of there for kind of frivolous reasons, and I think that's really important. And you touched on the 30 years of subculture as a weekly residence night. I mean, that's unique in the world, and actually in this day and age, that you don't really see very many places. I can't hardly think of any other places that even run a weekly residence night nowadays. It's not a thing that's commonplace. It was always the model that we had back in the 80s and 90s. It was always the kind of preferred model, was to have a couple of DJs that were there every week, and then maybe inviting other DJs to supplement that. But that model's gone out the window for clubs pretty much across the planet. It's all driven by guest DJ culture, as you call it, and the kind of hypier side of it. So there is something very unique about that, and I'm very proud to be involved in it. I've been promoting subculture for 30 years, but the biggest part of the plaudits for that has to go to the two residents that have been there right from the start, Harry and Dominic. Yeah,
absolute legends in their own right as well. So as you move through this, and obviously coming, maybe be interesting to know how, because we're talking about, this is our Human First podcast, so we're really interested in not just we're financial planners here, but it's the story behind that, and how people have overcome other challenges, and how that's impacted on maybe their plans along the way. So again, through the probably reasonably successful years of the kind of mid-2000s, although a lot of change across kind of club culture during that time, then COVID happens.
Yeah. Well, I mean, nobody in any sphere could plan for COVID, I don't suppose, although I guess to some extent, I suppose to some extent, governments had some kind of contingencies in place for it. But I mean, to say it was challenging would be to understate it massively. And for me personally, I had, again, these things just sometimes drop into place one way or the other. I had recently taken up the position as chair of the Nighttime Industry Association in Scotland. Literally about 2 months before that, I'd been on the board of the NTIA for a good number of years, but I had taken up the position as a Scottish chair. Just a month later, COVID happened, and I was kind of plunged into a period of my life where I spent most of my time over that period dealing with politicians at one level or another, or officials within the political system, basically fighting for funding for the industry as a whole, which I think we did. We did very well to over the piece to get buy-in from Scottish government, from the UK government, into some of the schemes that needed, that needed represented, because people don't generally see the late night economy in the same way as the mainstream economy. It's people have a view of it as in some way being, I guess, it's what you do for a laugh, it's frivolous, it's all of that. But of course, it's a huge contributor to the economy of the city, and to employment. So a lot of jobs on the line, a lot of businesses that were very much on the line, and we had to fight hard to get funding streaming through to those kind of businesses. So that was a hugely challenging. Of course, at the same time, try and rescue my own business.
That's right, exactly. I mean, you were busy helping lots of people at the time, but you still had your own livelihood to look after as well.
So I was really, it's hard to kind of qualify just how challenging that period really was, and somehow it's now it all feels a bit surreal. People seem to move on from it very quickly in a lot of ways in general life, but the recovery for our industry in particular has been tough. I think everybody, across all the various subsectors of hospitality, have found it difficult. So it's an ongoing challenge.
It's not changing, and as we talked before, it's even just footfall in the city centre. People's behaviours have definitely changed since that period, there's no question. I mean,
the numbers are quite stark actually when you see them, and how people's behaviour has changed, and people, some interesting things for me about that is how so many people got into the way of working from home. And then, post-COVID, we've had this kind of hybrid working model that's become much more commonplace. But, there's some really interesting stuff in there when you start digging into it. For instance, that, and it's not really surprising, I guess, to say it, but Mondays and Fridays are by far the preferred days for most people to work from home. Tuesdays, Wednesdays are the days when there are more people in the office at work, and Thursdays to an extent too. But, so people have got used to maybe building their lifestyles around a more home-based working environment. And that has profound implications for a city centre, not least, for the retail side, but certainly for hospitality businesses as a whole. And Glasgow in particular has no, it doesn't have a very big kind of population centre in the city centre. Most people come into Glasgow to use the services there and then go back out to areas out with the city centre. So that's had a really big impact on Glasgow city centre.
It's a strange, it's not something we took the view here, because we are very much a people-based business. We did the whole working at home, virtual. We got through it, and we made some changes to the business as we did that. But there was an appetite from our team and from people we work with to get back together and sit here like this face to face and have meaningful conversations. I think it becomes very functional over nobody really wants to sit on a Teams call for an hour and a half just kind of having an expansive conversation. It tends to be, right, we can do it to get through something and get to the point and there we go. But we didn't do that. We came back. We do notice it, because we've been here back in the office pretty much since June what are we doing, 2021?
21, yeah.
Would that be right?
Yeah.
There was that wee break
That's
at
right,
Christmas that year.
Yeah.
And our team's been in, but we've seen firsthand how slow it has been, the city centre has been to come back, which obviously affects everybody that relies on that footfall even to today. And it's funny, Mondays and Fridays are always a bit quieter on the roads and stuff, aren't they?
Absolutely. I think the thing with, you mentioned, Teams calls, and, back at the time when COVID hit, most people, it was Zoom was the one that everybody spoke about. But most people had never even heard of it, never mind used it. And here we are, 4 years down the line, and it's part of everybody's daily business. I'm on Teams calls several times a week, every week, and it is Teams now more often than Zoom. But and I think it has its place. I think it's interesting, but the dynamics are different. When you're having a conversation, when you have a group of people in a room and everybody can, you can share ideas, people can, you can see the light bulbs going on in people's heads, and, they make decisions or make suggestions or whatever. But on a virtual meeting room, it's you put your hand up and politely wait until it's your turn to speak. So the dynamic's very different, and I'm not sure what there's probably some pretty profound things come from that in terms of how people plan their businesses. I think it's an interesting thing. I'm not sure it's a particularly healthy thing.
No, I'm not a fan. I'm not a big fan of. We can have much more meaningful conversations and get much deeper with people when we're in the room. We have that connection. We can have you can see how people are reacting. You've got body language. You've much greater sense of their tone of voice. There's no audio issues or Amazon coming to the door or whatever it is. And I just find just much more engagement that way. And that encourage. I think there is if you listen to the Jungle Drums, there is a move by business to get people back into the office, no question. And there's all sorts of incentives being put in place now in offices. Fair enough, if that's what works to get people back in, because everyone's realising that we, as humans, we need that social interaction. Loneliness and isolation are huge problems, mental health issues and all that kind of thing. Being in amongst your colleagues in whatever way that is got to be good for you.
No, I couldn't agree more. And I think actually, that process, it masks a lot of underlying issues that people might have. Anyone can kind of scrub up for half an hour, and they're only going to see from your passport photo up. And you can be on your best behaviour for half an hour, and then be back to whatever problems you've got going on in your life. So it's a different dynamic. I think where people are in offices together and seeing each other, then you people recognise if someone else has a problem or whatever it might be. So I think business should be pushing to get people back into kind of normal working office life. I hope that is something that happens in a positive way.
It's funny that change is taking longer than some of the other changes that we talked about, and also that kind of move on from the pandemic. It happened kind of so quickly, but then some of this stuff is just taking longer. So thinking about more positive things, how do you see the future of your sector, and more specifically the sub club, which we'll care about deeply?
That's it's an interesting thing that it's always been the case that we've kind of got a saying that it's all, I guess it's a kind of cliched idea, I suppose, in a sense, but we're always thinking about the next party, the next event, not the previous one. And it's what defines electronic dance music in particular, is that it's always forward looking. It's always got to be what's coming next. That doesn't mean you don't reference what's happened before, but if you focus on what's happened before, then it stops, it becomes stale, it becomes ultimately becomes boring, and it will ultimately disappear. So it's always about the future in our business, but without the benefit of having a crystal ball, you're always really, to a large extent, it's guesswork. You know, I mean, it's informed guesswork, but you really don't know how the trends are going to go. And I think one of the things, I mean, without, going too deeply into the pandemic chat and the effects of it, one thing that, was quite apparent was that it was almost like a kind of fire break happened when people were stuck at home for a year, or in the case of our businesses, nearly 2 years, in Scotland. And this is something that out west Scotland people don't necessarily see, because people were allowed back into hospitality much quicker in England than they were in Scotland. And actually Glasgow had the most restrictions of anywhere in the UK during that period. But when people, and I see it particularly with student population, when people were stuck at home and having to work from home, and there was no club life, when it restarted, there was a kind of influx of people that were desperate to get out and get back into clubs or whatever. Or I'm saying back into, to get into it maybe for the first time.
That's right, of course.
Because for us, the younger people, they had no experience of it whatsoever. So they as a result, they didn't have anyone to learn behaviour from. So there was this kind of sense that all these young folk were appearing at clubs, and they really didn't know what they were meant to do when they got there. So we had people trying to walk in the door clutching their McDonald's or whatever as they walked in, and when you told them you can't actually bring your hot food in the door of a nightclub, they've said, why not? So the kind of the sort of rules of engagement, for want of a better way of putting it, kind of went out the window a bit. And I think it's always been the kind of pursuit that is peer led. So people always learn from their older siblings or other members of the family, or their friends' families, or whatever. And that kind of went, so we kind of experienced this kind of ground zero moment, I think, with nightlife. And that's what I think we're still trying to navigate, really, because for a lot of people, I guess a lot of people maybe a wee bit older than that, in their mid-20s and upwards, were maybe they maybe actually got to quite like staying in at the weekend, and they didn't feel that was I don't mean pressure, but there was no sort of necessity. Exactly.
You were missing out on anything,
exactly. So it's interesting how that all is going to pan out. I always think there's going to be an appetite for nightlife. I mean, it's something I think, this goes back so far in the human existence that people like to listen to music and dance. It's part of what we are as human beings. So I think it will always be there. I guess it's just trying to predict what the behaviour patterns are is really what my job's about, I suppose.
What does that mean for you personally as you look into your own future and how you might want to live the rest of your life?
Well, I think I've done a fair shift,
You have, you certainly.
I mean, I've been doing this for nearly 40 years, and if somebody told me, in the mid-80s, I would still be doing this when I was 65, I would have laughed. I just could never have conceived of it. So like most people my age, I do have a kind of some kind of an eye on a less busy life, if I can put it that way. I don't know if I'll ever be retired as such, but I think it's not really physically possible to keep the pace up.
No.
At night and day as you get older. It'd be a bit abnormal and perhaps a little bit unseemly.
That's right. Although I think you do notice there is still my generation and generations older than me that's still kicking about, enjoying the music, because that's what we love. I think it is an interesting, like that word retirement. We haven't really talked about that, and we don't really talk about it here particularly, which would sound weird for a kind of financial planning business. But it's, if you've got something that you love to do, it's a passion. It's not. Yes, it is. Of course, it's hard work, but it's doing what you love. That seems to be a common theme in these discussions. So, why would you give that up because somebody says oh well, you're 65 now, or you're 70 now, so therefore you shouldn't be working anymore.
Yeah.
You've got the ability to continue to do that, but maybe there's just finding a different balance of things, isn't there?
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly how I view it. I don't know that it will ever. I can't actually really envisage a time where I'm not involved in it in some way, you know. But it's just how you manage that, and you know, actually, it's really important that there's always, you know, that there's a younger, kind of energy coming through. That's what it's all about. So it shouldn't be for a geriatric like myself to really be ploughing that, you know, future path. I think that's, you know, it's really important. And it's something I've always tried to have in the business, that there's always been a kind of age gap there between, you know, myself and my business partners and so on, to try and make sure that you know, that younger energy comes through. That's really important for the business, you know.
And maybe just as we kind of come towards the end of this, is there any particular moments, favourite moments from, that 40-year career? I'm sure there'll be lots of interesting ones you probably can't talk about, but what were some of your maybe favourite ones from over the years?
There's been so many, you know, incredible moments, really, you know. I mean, the things that immediately spring to mind, I remember in 1989 in Fever in Aberdeen, when we'd booked, we booked some amazing stuff up there, some of which went on to become kind of household names, really, as live and touring bands and so on. But we had booked Jocelyn Brown to perform in the club, and what was a small club, smaller than the sub club. It was about a 250 capacity venue, and you know, I mean, the hairs literally stood up on the back of my neck, and even thinking about it, you know, it still feels like that. I mean, that was a truly memorable thing, when she literally did not need a microphone to you know, to wow the room. That was incredible. Other things that I guess, I look back to when the sub club celebrated the 20th anniversary in 2007, and we booked a week-long programme of stuff, and we had some really great things actually in that week. We had one of the original Kraftwerk members, Carl Bartos. He played live. We had you know, it was quite diverse, this actually. We had the Sugar Hill Gang, and then rappers Delight.
Is that gig? That was brilliant, because we all ended up on the stage with them.
I know, it was hilarious. And you know, and Louis Vega with a live vocal accompaniment, which was amazing. And we had Kerry Chandler did an incredible virtual harp thing using a laser harp, where he used these laser beams like the strings of a harp and played it live. You know, it's just incredible stuff. But the real kind of, you know, the real golden nugget for me was we had Roy Ayers playing live and singing in the club, and for me that was really special. That was a special one. So that week of events, you know, back then, there were other things as well, but I'm conscious that I'm trotting out a whole week long of stuff. But I mean, Roy Ayers on stage live in the sub club, I think it will always be hard to top that, you know.
Gosh, that's amazing. Well, thank you very much, Mike. Thank you for sharing that, and thank you for sharing your story with us.